welcome to the Detroit Institute of Arts Thursdays at the Museum program. I'm Ian Rapnicki, a community engagement manager for the DIA. Today's studio visit is with visual artist Tyanna Buie, who will discuss her work and demonstrate her screen printing practice. DIA studio coordinator Zach Freeling will be in conversation with Tyanna, and he'll take your questions throughout the program. So if you're watching on YouTube and you'd like to ask a question, be sure you're logged into your account and then leave a comment. If you're watching on Facebook, you can leave a comment there as well. We'd love to hear from you. But now let's hear from Tyanna and Zach.
Thanks, Ian.
Hey.
Hi, Tyanna. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. We're happy to have you. So today we're going to look at some of your work from some previous exhibitions, some recent work, as well as a little demo at the end showing one of your processes, right?
Yeah.
Great. So to start us off, this is an image you sent that this is kind of a recent work, right? Do you want to just maybe use this as a launching point to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, this piece in particular, a few of the techniques you use, then we'll kind of use that to, go into the rest of the presentation?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So, yes, my name is Tyanna Buie. A little background is, let's see, it's something that's a lot. But my work primarily deals with personal narrative. Lately, it's shifted a little more political, which I'll talk about later. But my work deals with, for the most part, I grew up in the foster care system. I'm the youngest of four, originally from Chicago, but I also grew up back and forth between Chicago and Milwaukee due to the foster care system. And my first process that I fell in love with was actually graphic design and metalsmithing. And then I got into printmaking, specifically screen printing. And I've been working in this process for the last, since I was introduced to it in undergrad, which is in 2005. So I've consecutively been working in this process ever since. And I think we'll share some of those processes and move into some later work. Yeah.
Great. You said you started in 2005 in undergrad. Where did you complete your undergrad at?
So my undergrad was at Western Illinois University, which is in Macomb, Illinois. They're known for law enforcement. They had this really cool underground art department is how I saw it, because I knew I was going to go to school for art. So when I went there, I was like, they have an art program? I'm here. And so learned a lot from my professor, who I'm still close with to this day, named Susan Chakowski. She taught me pretty much everything I know about the process. And then I went to graduate school at University of Wisconsin-Madison and learned some other processes and was able to fine-tune it to my way of doing things. Now I'm able to go back and teach some of my former professors some of my new processes that I figured out and come up with. So it's a really cool way to I think the process itself of printmaking is something that no one owns the rights to it. We all just learn it, and then we figure out a way to make it better for ourselves, and then we share that with somebody else and share that. And so it's this really cool gift, I think, of going.
That's great. So do you want to talk a little bit about this particular piece up on the screen right now?
Yes. This piece is actually for an organization that I became familiar with in 2019. I went out to Arizona. It's called the ACE Consortium, and they work with children who deal with trauma. And their goal is to just help kids over time and families that have dealt with trauma. And my background had a traumaful background, growing up in the foster care system. There was physical abuse. And so being able to use art as a platform to talk about really, deep-seated issues that are kind of, people don't really like to talk about those things. So I like using art as a platform to have those conversations. So when I went to Arizona, I became close to this organization, and I was like, I want to do more. So I started doing this, doing a limited edition prints. They're for sale on my website. They're for sale. There's if you go to my website, there's a link. And so this is actually, you're looking at the digital piece, and here's the actual piece.
Oh, nice.
It's a 9 by 12 inches. And it's actually a portrait of me when I was in the 3rd grade. And I am covering up my face because I'm thinking about how growing up I was very shy, very introverted. Also, I felt unseen and unheard. So I'm kind of having that conversation through this work. And so the work is at a really like discounted price so people can actually afford them, hopefully. And then the money goes to the organization in Arizona just to raise awareness of childhood trauma.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And it says here in the description that it's a screen print and collage. So that?
So yeah, so the process is screen print, and there's multiple processes you can do with screen printing. But maybe the flower here is actually a piece of jewelry that my mom owns, and so is the jewelry here that I kind of like self-imposed on top of the image. But this is traditionally screen printed, but then this is actually collage.
Oh, wow.
You see that?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's digital, but hand painted on top to kind of bring the colors out a bit more. Right. So the only thing that's digital is the flower, but I hand paint on top of it, and then the screen print is underneath. And that's on top.
Nice. I'm glad you have the physical in there. I've been looking at these images all week, putting this together, and it's interesting to look at it flat on a digital screen and try and tell what's what. So that's
right.
The actual one there. Cool. Well, let's look at a few more images here. I pulled these off your website. This was a exhibition you had pre-pandemic at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art, and this was a solo show, right?
Correct. So this was my first and only so far major museum solo exhibition at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art. I went to graduate school at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. So when I got there in 2007, I remember like, this museum is amazing. I would just be so honored to have a show. So here it is a decade later after I graduated, and I was able to have a show there. So very amazing experience. I got to put all of the work that I've been working towards together in one space. And it was it's funny because this show set a tone for what happened after. Leading up to the pandemic, of course, I didn't know, but I remember saying, I'm done using these images in my work. I'm moving on. and then somebody wrote an article and was like, well, what are you doing next? I was like, I have no idea. And then the pandemic happened, and that actually kind of catapulted me to the next. We can keep going and just see from the show.
Let's look at a few more from the show here. Yeah, I like this and the one before this just to really show the scale. So when you do, I know you showed the print, the first one we looked at, that's an edition, that's for sale, but are your pieces generally, like this is a monotype, so that's a one-off. Do you find yourself doing more, series of prints or kind of one-off pieces incorporating screen printing?
So yeah, I've actually mostly do one of a kind. So monotypes. I see printmaking as painting, even though I don't directly paint necessarily, but I see the same. I see it the same way, and I'm just trying to get a story across. And sometimes I need to just do one. I only do editions now for a cause, like the fundraiser, making multiple so people can buy them and I can actually disseminate them easily. But these, most of my work is 100% one of a kinds. This is it. I spend a lot of time just on one, and then I move on to the next one. Yeah.
Interesting. Which, so folks that are maybe not as familiar with screen printing or seriographs, usually would you agree that usually that technique is done, to make multiples? Like if Correct. You see prints in a museum, often like if you go to the DIA and see a Lichtenstein print or what have you, a Warhol print, often they're, one of many, but you're more using it as a technique to make your, individual piece of art, which is interesting.
And a lot of printmakers will do both. They'll do monotypes, they'll do monoprints, they'll do, and there's a difference between the two, and we'll talk about that in the demo today. What's the difference between a monotype and a monoprint? Or there's one of a kinds, and there's unique prints, but then there's also the edition. So yeah.
Great. Real quick before we get too far away from it, there was a comment in the chat. Someone was just asking of what was the name of the organization in Arizona you'd mentioned?
Oh, I'm so used to having my technology. We will put it in the chat.
Okay, yeah.
But it's also, if you go to my website, which is, I believe there's a link somewhere. It's the first thing on my landing page. Thank you. The first thing you see on my landing page. All the info there.
Great. All right, let's look at our next image here. This is from the same exhibition, right? And this was this just was really striking because it's the whole wall of the exhibition. Can you talk about a bit about how this came about, or how you even physically made this, how this was put together?
So a few things. What I like to do is at some point figure out a way to do a site specific where I get the measurements of a space and I make a piece specifically to the measurements of that space. So that was important for me to do a large scale. The reason why I like to work large scale, like it's very hard for me, by the way, to work this small. I started out working this small when I was an undergrad, and then I moved to and then I'm like, oh wait, I gotta work small again. So it's more comfortable for me to work large scale, and I like putting people in the atmosphere if I can. So having work that's larger than life, that's taking over a space, changing the atmosphere of the room. So all the works on here are objects that were taken out of family photographs that I got from my aunt. My aunt has all of the family photographs, and because of my family history is a little chaotic, where I didn't get to meet my grandparents. They died before I was born. The house that they worked hard to purchase in Chicago eventually burned down, and all of the stuff is gone. So there is no physical artifacts that I have left over. So every time I buy something like for my house, I have to start over from scratch. When I'm like, darn it, I wish my grandmother was here to give me that or give me that. And so I like the idea of looking at the photographs and just extracting out objects and tables and things that I like. That I'm like, I could have had these things, and giving them a platform to exist and kind of honor these objects of memory. I also like the background does look like a quilt. I've heard that a few times. People thought that the background is fabric, but it's all done on Stonehenge, which is my favorite printmaking paper because it's one of the cheapest, but also it's very durable. And this work was actually the background was I take it with me on a train. So because I work, so the pieces are done separate, and where you see maybe a breakdown of color, a lot of that is paper just pieced together. Okay. So the paper comes with me rolled up, and then I get to the space and I glue it together on the floor, and then we hang it in sections on the wall. So I even like the process of the way these backdrops have to be dealt with, almost like wallpaper. That's the other thing. Screen printing has a long history with wallpaper, fancy wallpaper, right? And only the rich were able to access this beautiful handmade wallpaper. So I always think about that with the history of the process that I'm working with.
Interesting, yeah. And here's a kind of a close-up of that, and you can see, so like these big blocks of colors, is the color applied to that through printing?
I'm sorry. Thank you. Good question. Those are actually applied by hand. So I do a combination of, I'll lay the paper out on the table and just take some tape, and actually each quadrant is hand applied ink on paper.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So then I'm, you can say it as that I'm painting, right? Because I am effectively, I am. So I'm not using a screen. I'm just using layers of paint by hand. And sometimes I have to go over it a couple times to make sure that the color is vibrant. I haven't done backdrop in a while because I'm like, oh my goodness, it's just so fun. And this isn't even the biggest backdrop I've done.
Oh, really?
No. There was one what was it? I don't know, 60, was it 60 feet?
Oh, wow.
Ridiculous. And so, yeah.
That's cool. And I like this kind of close up or different angle too, because you can really see that these objects are sort of almost dimensional, almost a little bit above or, floating almost.
And they actually are things that they are placed. So the screen print is, now the backdrop is hand applied ink on paper, but the objects are screen printed traditionally, but then they're cut out. And then I use this stuff called Sintra, which is a cool, bendable plastic. Oh. And I attach the screen print to the Sintra, and then that's adhered to the backdrop. So there is a little bit of a dimension. Cool. So, and I did that because I was like, I want them to be movable. So if I was to display this or re-exhibit, I could move them around, I could change them out. But I also wanted to give them some dimension so it's not too flat to the surface.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a very cool piece. And I love even just the objects are so beautiful too, but then seeing them blown up and then seeing them with these, nice complementary colors and seeing how they relate to each other. and then seeing it so large, this would be very cool to see in person, I'm sure. Let's look at a few more things. Yeah, this was another, so not from that exhibit, I don't believe, but another one. So this one, again, screen print, hand applied ink on paper. So kind of a combination of that traditional printing from an old photograph, and also the hand painting sort of.
Yeah. So this was actually for a show that happened at the Detroit Artist Market that Jeff Canalosi actually did. He curated it, and it was about the 67, the unrest of Detroit. And so I started to look at all the unrest that were happening across the country around the same time, and how all of the racial unrest really affected the public school system. And me growing up in the public school system in Chicago and in Milwaukee, and I grabbed this photo. This is actually like there was a pointer. There's an image. There's my aunt is actually in that photo.
Oh wow!
Second row, all the way to the left.
Okay, sitting in the chair all the way to the left.
Correct. That's my aunt, and this is her photo. And this is a Shakespeare School. She's in October since 1964. So I wanted to find something that was close to the time of a lot of the social, all of the racial unrest that was going on across the country, and the chair is. I think about those chairs. I immediately think about grade school because I remember those chairs in grade school. So like, what's an iconic representation of that time for me? That chair that I also think is a little universal. If you go to have history with a public school, and so I remember seeing a lot of in Detroit in particular at that time when I did some research during the unrest. People put signs on the school's door that just said no school. They didn't say any. There was nothing else. Just no school. I was like, wow, that sucks. Like, no idea when school's gonna start again, but we got too much going on to even consider school. And it's kind of like the pandemic. I think about it now. Like another thing that's kind of corrupting schools and
that's really interesting. That is an interesting parallel. I like just the size of this too. So I think that's one thing I always like about printmaking is, seeing smaller photographs blown up large and just seeing all those creases and wrinkles and things just really blown up. It's just so interesting.
This was actually fun to make it. I tend to make work in the, since I teach at College for Creative Studies and I'm the section chair for printmaking. So I tend to work in the space, which is really good to make sure that it's a workable space anyway. So if I could work in there, then we're good. Yeah. But I remember working on this piece in particular, and the students were like, "Huh." So they had a question about the fact that all the kids were Black, and that's something I never thought about. I said, "Oh yeah, well, segregation," and and I got into, we had a whole conversation about busing and segregation and race. So it was really good to I like the art once again to inform the conversation to the bigger topic. So
yeah,
that was nice.
That's great. Let's look at, we've got a handful more of things to look at here. This one, another large 8x12. I had a question about, we can kind of see peeking behind your shoulder there, sort of an average size screen that you'll be using for the demo portion later, which is about the size of a window or a poster, usually like 24x36 or so.
Yeah.
But for some of these really large ones, are you doing multiple screens? Are you using a really large screen? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the biggest screen that I use is the size of my body. So about, I would say, actually a little shorter, about 50 inches tall, maybe 55 inches tall, and about 36 inches wide. So I only use what I can handle. For instance, I don't buy rolls of paper, even though I'm working large, because you have to have a floor space to roll that paper out. And it needs to be flat. And I'm like, no, I did that once, never again. So I just buy sections of paper and I take my screen and I print on each section separately, and then I glue it all together. Like a quilt. It's very much of a quilting process the way I think of it. Because that's what I can handle and that makes sense for me. And I know people who work with rolls of paper, but like I said, you have to have a really nice studio space to deal with and handle that much paper. So I can't work with a screen bigger than the size that I have, which is 50 by 50. There's no way. I'm just it's not practical. So I teach my students, you can work with a screen this small and make a huge room with wallpaper, fabric, because you're just printing in sections. So if you think of it that way, that's easier for you to handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and I think in this one too, some of these objects look familiar, kind of going with that, the big wall-sized quilt image. So this is from an old photograph as well, a family photograph?
Yeah, so this is actually my grandmother, and that table, you just saw it in the previous image, that's that mid-century table. I'm obsessed with anything mid-century style. So I was like, man, I'm gonna have that table. And so it's a photo of my grandmother sitting with this table right there next to her. So I took away the couch that she was sitting on and just wanted to focus on her and the object. And also the things on the table are also in the previous image. So that lamp is missing a shade, which I was like, got some questions about that.
Yeah.
And the chain actually is me going back to my metalsmithing days of being able to do chain mail, which is my favorite thing to do. It's almost like knitting or crocheting. And me thinking about the objects that tie us to the person. So that was my, yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, that's a really nice one. We want to make sure we have plenty of time to get to your demo. So let's kind of go through some of these other ones quickly here. But we can still just kind of go through them, and if there anything stands out or you have any things to know. I noticed on this one and a few, they kind of look like Polaroids. Are these taken from Polaroids, or is that on purpose, or is that just how the framing is?
They definitely are taken from Polaroids. I think a lot of artists that work with images and photos, we tend to obsess over Polaroids. And I'm the Polaroid generation, and I told my students I feel sorry for them if they will never know what it's like to be having a photo taken of them on an old school Polaroid, not the new school stuff. And still having those actual Polaroids, and they're like breaking apart, and all the chemicals are inside. And so I wanted to reproduce the image as close to the image as possible, but also leave some room for some process techniques. So, for instance, the faces are the body and art is done with a traditional screen print process, but the faces are done with Caran-Dash, which we'll talk about. It's basically a water soluble wax pastel crayon. And once the water hits it, it turns into watercolor. And I tend to do this whatever I get, I can't go back and change it. So I like the known and then the unknown. So I know this is going to happen like this. I don't know what these faces are going to look like. So that's the series that we're looking at. Yeah.
Nice. All right, let's see what we've got next. And then here, even more, media. I see charcoal here, which I don't think has been mentioned before. But this one is also very cool.
The charcoal the hot comb, thinking about childhood relics and any, things that we can relate to as or thinking what I relate to when I look at certain objects, and thinking about the hot comb experience, and anybody from the African diaspora who knows that experience. That's a cultural signifier, thinking about that. But also the charcoal is that halo effect around the hot comb. So treating my works just like art, not necessarily thinking about, I don't get too caught up in the heavy tradition of printmaking. I learned that way. I know how to do all of that, but I love having fun with just pushing the envelope a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is another one that I one of a kind, could have been an addition, but I was like, no, I'll just make one.
Great. Let's go.
It took the actual, if you go back to that, the words at the bottom was, what I love about printmaking is you can just take stuff and just reproduce it. That's the fun part, which also puts a lot of people in trouble.
Yeah.
So taking my actual aunt's writing that was on the back of the Polaroid and just reproducing it and screen printing it.
So that Easter Sunday at the bottom had been on the back of this actual photo?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you're kind of remixing it in a way, making something.
Scanning the text and then just reproduce it.
Nice. So then up next, we've got another example of that kind of quilted wall, a site-specific thing, and this is actually right down the street from the DIA at the Simone de Sousa Gallery on Willis and 2nd, I think. So look at a few more from here. I hate to be going through these
you're fine.
too quickly because but just want to make sure we have time for the demo. But this is kind of similar to what we talked about with the other installation, with the pieces kind of floating up from the wall, cut out from a photo. It's great. And I love the hand, really seeing the texture and detail on this, the background on this.
Right.
Let's look at a few more. So then this is, again, similar, that idea we saw with the last, the cutout furniture, but this is clothing, I assume, also taken from photos.
Yeah.
In that hand cut paper, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, there is this like need sometimes to take the work out of the square.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you out of the square and I want you to exist on your own and be free as an image.
Yeah, especially when you're kind of, it seems like with a lot of your exhibitions, you're kind of working with the whole, really utilizing the whole gallery, which is kind of a cool thing to do in a solo exhibition. You're not stuck with just, here's your space to put your art or your square or whatever. You're kind of using the whole thing and, using the whole wall as your canvas, as it were.
And also playing with display, so that piece being lowered on the thing. So we can look down at it. And then, this gets me into a really cool collaboration I did with Shepard Fairey 2020, right before the 2020 election. Specifically, this piece was done in Milwaukee, so it's a permanent piece, it's still up. And it was a collaboration that I didn't have to physically do any work, which I was excited. So I didn't have to actually paint on the wall.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
Yeah, it was actually just Shepard Fairey reached out to, he got a list of artists that they thought he would work with very well, and he just implemented 5 of us, our works, into the mural. So the piece at the top is actually a piece that I did in 2018 of my great aunt that he was
nice.
Okay, yeah, that he felt that would look great. Yeah,
nice. So this was sort of so Shepard Fairey is artist, muralist. So basically he reached out to a few artists and had you all contribute something, and then
him and his team actually went up and painted it. And I remember calling him while he was on the scaffold at the top.
Oh yeah.
He was like, could you just add a little bit more of a blah? And he was so nice. And that actually spawned, I did a talk that's on YouTube that you can access for free.
Oh, cool.
I had him come back and do a virtual talk about his practice with, and I was the moderator, me and my undergrad professor who introduced me to his work years ago. So that is actually on my website as well, and I can give it to you guys to put a link in. But it's on my website, but you can see this great talk about how he works with social, engaging political work.
That's great. I was kind of thinking so he had a big show at Cranbrook a couple of years ago. He has some big murals in town, and I just kind of had a sudden flashback to, I remember in high school I had to make a paper bag book cover for to go over your books or whatever. And I remember making a stencil of his Obey logo. Ooh, and that was maybe one of my first printmaking experiences, was doing copying his famous Obey Andre the Giant logo.
I love it.
But yeah, it's cool to think back on those types of things. I think that he's probably a pretty formative, probably a lot of people's first experience, or thinking about printmaking, going back to the the Obama poster and also his other public artwork. So you said that this kind of influenced some of your more recent work, which we have a few here. We'll go through quickly.
Yeah, I think just having a platform to work with another artist who works with a political perspective and also very open about it, and which side Shepard Fairey's on, makes no mistake. And thinking about it, so also of course the murder of George Floyd, all of that happened really shaped the way I think moving forward. And so I started playing around with this app called Reface over the pandemic. I was pandemicking by myself, by the way. A lot of people, I was alone, no pets. I had some plants. And so I found myself on Instagram and all these apps a lot, having fun. And then I was like, and then it was a challenge to, can I turn this into art? And so I loved during the Democratic vice presidential debate when Kamala Harris is having to tell, Mike Pence, hey, I'm speaking. You got to speak. And just this moment that went viral, and I just kind of capitalized on that moment and made myself Mike Pence and made myself Kamala. And then that became, I just did a partnership with Wayne State University for a Billboard series through
Which
the
is
press
we have
team.
next. Yeah.
And so that piece, I was like, I was gonna do something totally different, and then I was like, nah. I had to consult my 20-something people. It was like, you think that? It was like, Tyanna, it'll be hilarious. You have to do it.
So I think we have a picture of it as a billboard next, which is also right down the street from the Museum on Woodward.
Like, that's it. Yeah, and people thought that was like a Kamala thing. They're like, is that a new campaign? They didn't know what the heck it was, but I thought it was pretty funny. And now I'm curating a series right now that's still up. So the In the Air series is still happening in Detroit. With the next 3 artists for the next semester. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. So if you're around Woodward, you can check those out.
Yeah, yeah. And then that reface work spawned the next rendition. Yeah. So me playing around with that digitally, I said, okay, now I want to bring it into a screen print focus that I've always done. So I refaced myself as prominent Black women who are speaking. So I have to respond to my own Billboard series of what do I mean by I'm speaking, listen to Black women. And so I brought up some either controversial or some uplifting speeches that happened. So Maxine Waters was going off about Haiti and how the way we were treating Haitians. And then I have a parallel to Whoopi Goldberg's Oscar speech, and thinking about how every time a Black woman or Black person does an Oscar speech, it becomes a super inspirational thing. And then I just kind of refaced me as all these Black women.
I think we have one more slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, so another example, and then one.
So Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, when she gave her, and she had to step down after talk about the controversy around that.
And then this one on the right of a piece in the gallery with a QR code, kind of incorporating technology there too.
So each piece has a QR code. This work is up right now at the Freeport Art Museum in Freeport, Illinois. And so yeah, you have to have you get your phone and go to the QR code and watch the actual speech. So so everybody's going around the gallery, which was fun, and just like people who've never used QR codes, never heard of them. There was a man in his 80s. He was like, "What?" But he did it. He was so excited. So I love infusing technology with the 2-dimensional work.
Yeah, especially with a form of printmaking can be a pretty traditional medium, but it's great that you're kind of incorporating the technology in the the composition of it, and then also what more you can do with it. It's cool to see. Well, speaking of technique, and we did have a question. Someone asked, "Where is your studio now?" And I think you touched on that a little bit. That you're the print chair at CCS, College for Creative Studies, so you can use that space as your workspace.
Yeah.
But also when I think that's kind of what we're getting at is that when you're not at a studio or not in a print lab, when you're just at home or in a home-like space, how you're able to do work there too. Is also I think now you're going to show us a bit about that and maybe talk a bit about how you came to this process throughout the pandemic and whatnot. Yeah,
that's a great question. I think access is complicated for anyone with processes that are like glass blowing, printmaking, ceramics.
Right.
But from there, for printmaking, it's a little easier to translate printmaking to a personal space at home. So I don't have a traditional studio. I haven't had one in like 4 years. I'm kind of transient. I go here, I go there. But depending on the work that I want to make for a show, I just had a show maybe few months ago, and it was all digital and video. So there was no screen printing at all. So I was like, okay, but the pandemic really helped me figure out alternative ways of making. So I'm not forced to just be able to do one thing. And I feel claustrophobic if I feel like I can't make work because there's a barrier. I don't like barriers. So it's like, okay. So I have done work that I'm going to show you today. Like if I but to work smaller, I would work smaller. And I could do traditional screen print processes at home if I want. But if I don't want to do that, I just want to maybe just get something started and play. This is one of my favorite processes that I'm going to show you guys. Cool. But yes, so I eventually want my dream studio. But until then, I like the idea of just like, okay, I can work. I'll do this for that. Okay, I'll do something digital. I can go to Kiko's, print that out. I'll do a video, send you a video. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I think we
might
can see.
Oh, there we go. Great.
Okay, perfect. So I have to, yeah. This paper that I'm working with right now, just making sure. I usually work with the paper that's Stonehenge, but I don't have any available with me today where I am. But I do have this paper, which is a very beautiful, thin, ultra light Reeves. That's Rives, and they have a little top on it. I don't know if you can see through the light, but there's usually, it tells you in the corner like what kind of paper this is. And the thing about printmaking is that the paper we use is actually fiber, not tree. So it's made from fibers, and it actually holds the ink really well. So if I use like newsprint, the newsprint will degrade over time. It will literally just like disappear, disintegrate. This paper isn't going anywhere. So because it's made of fiber, right? So printmaking paper is going to be a little bit more expensive than like construction paper. Mm-hmm. But I say treat your paper like canvas, and treat it, you know, it's a surface. So what I'm going to do is just use a ruler. I don't need this much paper, so I'm going to just use a ruler. And I like the cork back rulers because I can get close to this straight edge when I tear my paper. I can get as close to it as possible. So I'm just going to tear it down, and just if I have to move this, I'll move this. And actually, what I'm going to do is just kind of move around to the other side so this camera can see me tear the paper. So I'm just going to lay the ruler down, and then I'm going to pull the paper towards me, keep my hand on the ruler, and then just slowly inch the paper down. This is something that you might be thinking is very simple, and it is. However, every semester I teach my students this, and it blows their minds. They're like, I don't need a paper cutter? I'm like, no. This $3 ruler is your paper cutter. We don't like to use scissors or X-Acto knives when tearing paper in the printmaking world because we actually like to preserve this nice decoed edge. It comes off in the factory. They chop it off from a ream, and we actually we like to keep that and preserve the paper for what it is. So that's why, and we don't necessarily fold the paper either. All right, I'm also going to just tear. We're going to do two different types of prints. So I'll tear this as well.
Yeah, I noticed that on the print you held up earlier, you could kind of see that really nice edge. On that
yes,
well.
you see the frayed edges, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The first thing I'm going to do is play around with some stuff that you possibly have in your house. Okay, we got a couple options. And also graphite. So I'm going to go through different things that you guys can use. Some of the stuff you might have at home, but also the other cool thing about this process is it's inexpensive. So it's my favorite one to go, okay, I'll talk about the cost of screens. You can get a screen from Dick Blick. You can go online, you can go to Amazon and get a screen for $30 or even less, depending on the size. If you are someone who really wants to try this process, make sure you get a screen with a mesh count of 230. I want you to think of mesh count like sheets. You know, you have the low thread count, high thread count. So the higher the mesh count for a screen, the better and clearer your image will come out of the screen. People who print on fabric, and you can print on fabric, by the way, with all of this, but there's different screens for different things you want to do. But this basic screen that I have is a 30 mesh count. I can print on fabric, I can print on everything, paper. So for this process, we're going to use water-soluble and water-soluble materials. For instance, washable markers. Sorry, which way? Okay, we'll go here. Washable markers are water-soluble. Water-soluble means water breaks it down. Water-based is what my inks are made of. Let me see. For instance, this is like a mixed ink. But inks, screen printing inks are usually, my favorite is Speedball. is the brand. Those are water-based. They also are technically water-soluble, but they're made with water, right? And these are made for water to break them down. So that's my washable markers. You can use that for this process. You can also use now these are a little bit more pricey. Like this little container is gonna be like $20. But Caran d'Ache are water-soluble wax pastels. And if you just imagine a crayon that you can just dip in water and like take the pigment out, that's basically what this is. And the reason why they're pricey is because they come in so many, the potency is really like amazing. So you're paying for the pigment. That's why they're cost so much. They have knockoff brands. I've tried them all, but these are the best. Water soluble, it says it on the packaging. Baby powder is interesting. We'll use that and talk about that in a minute. And also graphite. And the question you ask yourself is, can I clean this out with water? If you can clean it out with water, it's water soluble. So you can use charcoal. You can use actual pastel. You can use watercolor pastel. And I'm checking the clock, so I'm good. I'll be quick. Once I start printing, it's gonna go quick. So don't worry. The printing takes like no time. The prep takes a while. Sure. Okay. Well, first thing I'm going to do, my screen is actually, I thought I had a smaller screen here, but this is actually pretty big for what I'm doing. I usually like smaller screens. So what I'm going to do is flip my screen around. And so what this screen is made of is mesh. This mesh is actually a plastic and it's rotted up fishing net. So it's basically like, it looks like a fabric. And technically you could take silk and stretch it across anything and then screen print through the silk. We don't do that anymore. Silk is very pricey. You would have to go to another country. I know in Japan and China, they still use actual silk. So what I'm going to do for now is just move my paper. And one thing I actually need is water. So I'm going to just pour a little bit of this water in a small little cup. I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so here's my little cup of water. And I'm going to start with the Caran d'Ache directly to the screen. So the screen, sorry.
And what brand are we had a question. What brand are the Caran d'Ache?
That is the brand.
That's the brand? Okay. Yeah. So Caran d'Ache is the brand of the.
Correct.
Yeah.
They sell these at Anthropology, like clothing stores. I've been in clothing stores and I've seen them sell it. They pretty much sell it everywhere. It's like great for water. It's like great for sketching and whatever.
Gotcha. It's like your Blick or Michaels or Joann's.
Blick, Michaels. They're pretty much everywhere at this point. I think Joann Fabrics even sells them.
Yeah.
So the screen is this is pretty new. So you can hear that. And it also sounds like a drum. It's stretched really tight with glue on the sides of the metal. You can get wood or metal screens. But you do have to be careful not to have anything sharp because you can puncture the screen. If you puncture it, it won't just tear all the way. You can put like duct tape on both sides if you accidentally hurt your screen. So I'm going to just put Caran d'Ache on the screen, just making marks, just by itself. I'm not even going to dip it in water yet. I'm just going to show you. It literally looks like crayon. So if you want like a cool crayon effect, open this and do some more. So let's grab. Okay, so this is just directly Caran d'Ache onto the screen. All right, let's see. And then I'm going to take charcoal. Sorry, this is woodless charcoal, and it's a medium. Also directly onto the screen. The cool thing about the screen and the mesh is that this is 230 mesh count, so it's pretty. The holes are really tight, like together, like you need a microscope to see them. Kind of like fabric. Mm-hmm. But the screen is not forgiving. That's what I like about screen printing. When you first do it, you're probably like, what the heck? Why? Like, I like that it's not forgiving. So anything you put on this mesh, it wants to come out of the mesh. It wants to come out. So, okay. I'm also going to take my washable marker Well, let's see. Are they dried up? If they are, I'll show you a trick. Okay, there we go. There's some browns from the marker. So we have Caran d'Ache, the charcoal, the washable marker. And this is the process that I like to do with, I do a lot of workshops and I tend to do them, like I'll go to like grammar schools and work with kids. It's actually my favorite one to do with kids.
Oh yeah. Do you have them work on their own individual smaller screens or their own large screens?
Yeah, they actually collaborate. I'll bring like 6 screens with me to a school and put them in groups of like 4.
Mm-hmm.
And they all get to just spend like 30 minutes drawing on a screen like this.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to do the same thing I just did, but I'm going to take my Caran d'Ache now and dip it in the water. So you can just kind of see. I'm going to lay this up so you can see how it literally see how it got denser? And also,
oh yeah,
it literally like melts a bit. And like if I do that, it turns into like a cool watercolor.
Yeah.
Like magic right before your eyes. So, so I can do that. I'll do that a few more. And then I'll show you my screen before I print it so you can see.
You're doing that on what would be the print side of the screen, the side that's going to make contact with the paper?
So this is the side that's not, yes, this is the side that's going to make contact with the paper, the outside of the screen. And you can also do it on the inside of the screen, but if you do words, you would want to do that on the inside of the screen so you can see the words and they're not in reverse.
Right.
You can see them. So I'm going to show you if I write my name this way, you're going to see it's going to be reversed because I'm going to turn the screen over.
Right.
Right? So if you want to write, I would say write on the inside of the screen. Okay, and then we're going to do, let me grab another. Right. The other cool thing is that I can take regular, this is already like pre-mixed paint or ink. I'm going to grab, this is the brand I like, Speedball. Make sure if you purchase it, it has a piece of paper and not a t-shirt, so you're not getting t-shirt ink. So it says acrylic, screen printing ink. They also have smaller bottles for like much. Like this is like $25, but you can do smaller for like 10 bucks. So I'm taking the acrylic paint, acrylic ink, and we call it ink in printmaking because it's meant to be flat. And I'm actually going to take my brush and just paint directly onto the screen. So you can literally treat your screen like a canvas and just paint directly on it, spend time building up imagery. I've had students just draw with pencil and do mono. And this process is called a monotype. Mono meaning one, right? We got one of a kind, and I can't make these marks exactly the same again.
Mm-hmm.
After we do this, we'll do a mono print. So you can see the difference. So now I'm ready to print. So here's the we'll just move this here. You can see it here. Okay, so here's the question. It's hard to see because the sun is, put this here. How do I get, this pigment off of the screen? Especially if it dries. So say you're working and you're like, I'm gonna take a while to work. It's gonna take me, an hour. That's okay. In fact, I would prefer the pigment to be dry on the screen before we print it. So what I'm going to do is lay my screen, not flush to the paper just yet, but just kind of put it up on a little, there's a little thing there to keep the screen from touching the paper. Mm-hmm. Because the main way to get this image off, we're going to use this stuff here called transparent base, and this is also Speedball. Transparent base is basically pigmentless ink, so it's literally transparent, and it's actually made with more water than my inks, and so it is technically water soluble, but it's just made with more, so it's much wetter So in order to get this pigment out of this screen, I need something wet to force it through. So what I'm going to do is take my transparent base and just write on the image area. And I'm just taking like a spatula and just gliding the transparent base across the image area so that I can loosen up the dry pigment because it dries pretty fast. As much as I can. And then the next one I'll show you will be much quicker. So, sorry, you had a question?
We had a question about what type or brand of screen are you using, and also why is it yellow?
Most of the meshes are yellow if they're a higher thread count. So because this is a 230, the mesh count. Now some companies will have a white mesh. As long as it's 230, the color doesn't even matter. This is a company called Victory Factory. They're a mom and pop shop that still answers the phone, so you have to call them. Go to their website and you tell them this is the screen I want, this is the size, and this is the mesh count. And I've been working with them for over a decade. They're amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now I'm putting the screen down flush to the paper. Now, technically, if I was like at school or at a traditional space, I would have clamps and all this other cool stuff. And if you go to YouTube and figure out how to build a table, that's all that stuff is there. But for me, I do this sometimes without, just like this. So I'm going to take my squeegee. Squeegee is how we're going to get this ink. We need a straight edge, right? And we also have to put the squeegee on an angle. The angle is a 60-degree angle. So if you see my angle here, I'm actually going to hold my hand down on this part of the screen so that this doesn't go anywhere. And I'm actually going to start on one side. And that squeegee noise you just heard is actually a good thing. That's how I know I did a good print. I have all this like excess ink from my pool that I'm going to just put in a slop jar or whatever and mix it up. Okay, and I'm gonna do this side. So that's the pigment leaving the screen. And the transparent base, like I said, because it's wetter and it's thick, it's actually holding my image kind of in one spot. So now what I'm gonna do, so you can see it on this side, this is called kissing. So I'm gonna peel my paper back from the print. Okay, I'm gonna move this out of the way just so I can show you the result.
Oh, wow.
So you see everything that transferred. Because the screen is not forgiving, all of this stuff is going to pick up. And guess what? As long as I have pigment in my screen, I can print another one. And that'll be called a ghost. So when you have the original and then you have the ghost print. And so a lot of printers, this is their process. Now, the great thing is because it's water-based, this stuff dries pretty fast. Like it's already trying to dry. I could blow dry it. But because we have only a few minutes left, I'm going to do my next thing. And we're going to turn this monotype into a monoprint. And a monoprint is if you have like a stable stencil. So I could draw a stencil on a screen, but we don't have time for that. So my stencil for now is going to be nature leaves. So I have some eucalyptus here and some leaves from another plant. So I'm just going to take the thick part of the stem and break it off so it's not too thick for my squeegee to go over it. And make sure when you put stuff like down on your screen, it just needs to be flat so we don't puncture the screen. The screen is sensitive. So technically this is still a monotype, but because there's some type of stencil that is the same, I'm not going to cut these. I didn't hand cut these. It came from, whoever you believe in spiritually. So, so Mother Nature hand cut these. But what I'm going to do is lay them directly onto my print, my paper. Grab my screen, flip it around because I have this empty space. And I'm going to just little squeegee ink over this.
Oh, I was going to say, so there's still pigment on the screen there, but we're just ignoring that for now.
Yeah, but just know we can do a ghost of that.
Yeah.
Let's make this nice blue. Now, mind you, these inks have been in my basement for a year, and they're fine. Just make sure you close them. You can have this ink forever. Just close it.
Water-based ink?
Huh?
And that's the water-based speedball ink?
Yes.
Nice.
You just have to make sure you close your containers. I order these containers online and just get just get some, they're like food containers. And then I just order them. So I'm putting ink down. My screen is flush to my print and the leaves are there. So I'm going to do a few things. Okay, I'm going to grab my squeegee. I'm going to just print right over and so notice when I'm printing, you definitely want to print with your body and not like your wrist. You're just putting all of your energy into it. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm going to go ahead and peel this print back. I want to show you what's left in my screen, but also what happened to my print. This is the leaves that's like trapped on there. That's cool. You can leave it there in Collage if you want. But of course, because this ink is water-based, and I put some transparent base in that other ink. Actually, I think I'm going to show this one. Sorry, I'm going to show this screen. All right. So you get to see this like background, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And you get the negative. But then I'm going to do something else real quick that I like. So what happened with the screen is you see the impression left by the leaves?
Yeah. Oh, wow,
We're going to lift that off now and print that.
Oh, cool. So
one of the best ways to do it would be to blow dry it. We don't have time for that. But if I don't blow dry, which I've done it in the past, where I'm just like, okay, I put out a new piece of paper, and I'm actually going to take transparent base, mind you, because it's thick, and it will lock the print in the screen. It'll lock the pigment in as much as it can and not let it run. And then I'm going to just kind of wipe my squeegee off. I just have some shop rags here. I got from Home Depot. It's always good to have a bunch of shop rags. And then now I'm just going to take this transparent base and print not too heavy because I don't want to compromise the stencil and also don't want the pigment to run. So I gave it a nice little light print.
Oh, wow.
So the fun thing about this is that you get to experiment and play around, and there's nothing you can do wrong. You just got to keep playing and go, oh, I like that. How do I get that again? And go for it. But that was, and mind you, like I said, and we have technically 2 minutes left. I could print this again or print that again, but basically just for like, now I tend to do this process here for backgrounds for my work. So I will just work backgrounds all the way to like they're kind of crazy, and then I let that and then I take them into the studio and work on them some more, or keep layering and keep playing around with different colors and textures. So this is one of my favorite processes because I can do it at home too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but I went to CCS for screen printmaking shortly before. Or maybe not shortly, but a little bit before you came along. And, so I went to school for this, and like, these are techniques I have not done or seen. Amazing printmaking process. Printmaking is so amazing. It's a very traditional thing. It's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, but people are still finding new stuff, trying new things, doing new techniques. It's great. This is a great example of a way, you could get started and try it out at home. Those leaves, that could be any type of stencil that could be cut up, freezer paper. It could be other things you find. could be whatever.
Yeah, and I could take these stencils, the leaves that's still wet, and I could literally just stamp them directly on the paper, which I've done before. You get this cool little off to the side there. You get that. And me just stamping right there. And so it's like the gift that just keeps going if you allow it.
Yeah. And then going back to your work too, thinking, the collage based, you could always take what you print and then cut it up, make it into a collage, use it for portions for something else. This is great. Very cool.
So thank you guys. That's the quickest demo I've ever done.
Great. Well, we're right at 2:00. Thank you so much for talking about your work with us, for showing us a few techniques, talking about printmaking. We'll link to your website again so folks can check out more work. Oh, and we wanted to share too, you've got an exhibit coming up in Michigan too at Cranbrook.
Yeah, Cranbrook Art
Museum. And that's a group exhibition called Homebody, and you're going to have some work in that and that opens January 26th, I think.
Yes.
January 26th, and it's running through June. So you've got all spring to go. If you haven't been to Cranbrook in a while, there's some amazing exhibits up. It's always great to walk the grounds there, spend some time outdoors. Thank you all for watching. A lot of nice comments here. A lot of people saying thank you, and people that enjoyed the presentation and that say you're an amazing artist and instructor and that they learned so much. So that's great. So thanks, Tyanna. We'll talk to you soon, and hopefully, we'll do some more printmaking online or at the museum or whatever. Hopefully we'll see you around town.
Thank you guys. And if anybody has questions, go through my website, send me a message. I can help you out if you want to do more. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned next week. Next week, we'll be doing a virtual tour of exceptional Baroque art from the collection. And they'll be hosted by Ray Henney and Cindy Patrick. And thank you to Amanda and Ian for helping us out behind the scenes today. And have a great rest of your week. Thank you.